Humans saved an alien girl from the shifting sand. Her first whisper felt like more than relief. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Evan Cole tasted sand in the back of his throat before he even saw the danger. The desert wind pushed fine grains across the flats in shimmering waves, each gust changing the ground like it was breathing. His terrain scanner beeped softly against his chest plate, the display pulsing with warnings about unstable substrate. He brushed the screen with a gloved thumb, narrowing his eyes against the afternoon glare. The horizon bent slightly where the heat met the dust, but something else caught his attention. A flicker of motion, a shape too small to be an animal and too still to be debris. The ground shifted again, letting out a low, hollow sigh beneath his boots. Evan stepped closer, planting each foot the way a cautious hiker might test a frozen lake. At first he thought it was fabric caught in the sand, maybe from a dropped pack. But then he saw fingers. Small, delicate, trembling as they pushed weakly upward before sinking again. Evan's breath caught. "Hey, hold on, I see you," he yelled, though the wind shredded his voice. He dropped to his knees, feeling the surface give under his weight, and anchored his climbing spike into the nearest solid patch. The ground quivered like a restless animal, tugging at anything unlucky enough to stand still. He clipped the tether to his belt and crawled forward. "I've got you," he murmured, unsure if the person could hear. The hand vanished completely for a terrifying second. Evan plunged his arms into the warm sand, fingers brushing something smooth, an arm, trembling, impossibly light. He pulled, careful but firm, letting his weight and the tether counter the shifting ground's pull. Sand climbed up his sleeves and pressed against his skin as if trying to swallow both of them. But inch by inch, the figure rose, a girl. Not human, not even close. She was barely conscious, her skin a soft blue with silvery undertones that caught the sunlight like polished stone. Sand clung to her hair, a pale white that fluttered against her cheeks. Her chest rose shallowly, each breath a fragile effort. Evan held her carefully, cradling her weight as the sand finally settled around his boots. For a moment, she didn't move at all. Then her eyelids twitched, revealing eyes the color of warm amber, bright even through exhaustion. Her lips parted, the faintest sound escaping, more breath than voice, shaky but intentional. "Don't leave," she whispered. The wind softened for a heartbeat, as if listening. Evan blinked, surprised by how her words landed. Gentle, raw, something heavier than fear but lighter than trust. He adjusted his grip, steadying her as she leaned weakly against him. "I'm right here," he said quietly. "You're safe now." And he wondered why her whisper felt like more than relief. Why it felt like the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. The sand settled enough for Evan to move without feeling the ground shift beneath every step. He adjusted his hold on the alien girl, careful to keep her weight supported while he scanned for any stable path away from the flats. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder, her breath warm but unsteady, and every few seconds her fingers tightened around the fabric of his sleeve as if grounding herself. "You are going to be all right," Evan said softly, unsure if she understood his language, but hoping the tone alone carried meaning. The sun dipped lower, washing the dunes in a pale gold glow that made her silvery skin reflect faintly, like frost-catching light. Wind traced thin lines across the sand, whispering around their ankles as Evan guided them toward a jagged ridge of dark rock. Shelter was close. He felt it more than saw it. The ridge broke the wind and promised solid ground, a place where the girl could breathe without the threat of sinking again. When they reached the first outcrop, Evan set her down gently, letting her lean against the rock. She blinked slowly, her amber eyes adjusting to the shade. "Can you hear me?" he asked. Her gaze lifted to his face. She nodded once, small and careful, as though the motion cost her energy. Her voice was barely a sound. "Yes." Evan, hearing his name from her, felt strange, like she had reached deeper than he expected. "You can talk," he said with a quiet laugh of relief. "That is good. That means you are stable." She studied him in a way that made the air feel different, curious, and cautious at once. You pulled me out, she whispered. You should not have been that close to the sand shifts. Well, he said, pulling his canteen from his belt. You were already closer, so I figured one of us should not be. Her lips moved in something almost like a smile before she sipped the water he offered. She drank carefully, as if enthused to the sensation, then exhaled in a soft, trembling breath. Thank you, she murmured. My name is Selah. Selah, he repeated, making sure he said it gently, letting the syllables settle between them. Do you know what happened out there? She looked at the sand stretching endlessly away from the ridge. The ground, it changes. My people call it living dunes. I misstepped. The wind was stronger than I expected. She paused as if searching for the right words. I was alone. Evan crouched beside her, checking the small portable scanner he carried in his vest. Nothing dangerous showed up, but her vitals were lower than he liked. You need rest, he said. There is a cave up ahead. Just a small one, but it will keep the wind off us. Selah's eyes moved toward him, steady for the first time. You help without asking anything. Humans are not always like that in our stories. Evan shrugged lightly. Stories do not know me. Her breathing eased a little. She lifted her hand, placing her palm against the rock, grounding herself. When you reached for me, she whispered, I thought the sand would take me instead. Her voice softened even further. But then you held on. Evan offered his hand, letting her take it if she chose. After a moment, her fingers touched his, cool and light. He helped her stand, guiding her slowly toward the narrow cave in the rocks as the wind carried their footsteps away. And for reasons he could not quite explain, the desert felt a little less empty with every step she took beside him. The cave was barely tall enough for Evan to stand upright, but it held a steady calm that the open dunes could never offer. The wind softened at the entrance, lowering to a gentle hiss as it curled around the stone. He guided Selah inside, her steps light but uneven, and he could feel the way she relied on his arm for balance even though she tried not to. The interior glowed faintly with reflected amber light from the setting sun, catching each curve of the rock. Selah eased herself onto a smooth patch of stone, exhaling carefully as though her body was still remembering how to breathe without fear. Evan set down his pack and switched on a small lantern. A warm, steady glow filled the cave, revealing how delicate she looked in its light. Her silvery skin shimmered faintly, almost translucent near her temples where slick strands of pale hair rested. She watched him with quiet curiosity, her eyes tracking every movement. You are tired, Evan said. Rest for a moment. The dunes are no place for anyone when the night wind rises. Selah tilted her head slightly. You speak as though you know this land well. I know enough to respect it, he replied as he checked the temperature gauge on his portable heater. The desert would drop to a cold bite within the hour. This place does not forgive mistakes. Yet you walked straight into the sand shifts, she murmured. That was not wise. Evan laughed softly. Probably not. But someone was sinking. That felt more important. Her gaze lowered for a moment, as if she was absorbing the idea. When she looked up again, something gentler rested in her expression. My people believe the dunes echo intent. They respond to fear, to haste, to certainty. What about kindness? Evan asked, adjusting her sitting position so she would not slide on the rock. For a moment she did not answer. Then she said, kindness is rare. The dunes do not understand it. She hesitated before adding, sometimes, neither do we. Evan sat beside her, leaving respectful space but close enough that she could reach him if she needed support. The lantern's warm glow softened the angles of the cave. Selah drew her knees closer, wrapping her arms around them in a slow, deliberate motion. When I fell, she whispered, I did not think anyone would see me. Evan glanced at her, noticing the way her eyes fixed on the cave floor as if the memory was still, fresh beneath her skin. But I did, he said. And you are here now. She nodded slowly. Your world, the humans I have met, they often speak loudly. They act quickly. They assume. Her eyes moved toward his face, steady, calm. You did not assume. You listened to the sand before you crossed it. Habit, Evan replied quietly. The ground tells you more than people expect. She considered that, tilting her head the way someone might when trying to understand an unfamiliar melody. Your voice, she said after a moment, did not sound afraid. That was luck, he admitted. I was definitely afraid. Her lips curved slightly, almost a smile. Your voice did not show it. The wind outside dropped to a low sigh, steady as breathing. Selah shifted, carefully, letting her shoulder brush the rock behind her. Evan, she said softly, when you held on to me, it felt like the first solid thing in a long time. He glanced at her, meeting her amber eyes. Then hold on to that for now, he said, until you feel steady again. She inhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. Yes, she whispered. I think I will. And for the first time since he found her in the shifting sand, she let her eyes close without fear. The cave stayed quiet through the early hours of the night, the wind outside settling into a soft, steady rhythm that reminded Evan of distant waves. He adjusted the small heater to push a gentle warmth toward Selah, watching the way the glow touched the edges of her skin. She looked better now, less pale, her breathing deeper and more even. Evan sat nearby, legs stretched out, his back against the cool stone. He kept half an eye on his scanner, but most of his attention drifted toward her. Selah opened her eyes slowly. Blinking as if waking from a dream, she was not certain she had left. Her gaze moved to the heater first, then to him. You stayed awake, she murmured. I needed to make sure you were all right, Evan said. You took in a lot of sand. Your body might still react. She studied him with that quiet intensity she always seemed to carry. Humans do not usually watch over others without reason. Maybe not all humans, Evan replied, but I am not very good at walking away from someone who needs help. She held his eyes for a moment longer, and something softened there, a small shift like a dune settling after a long gust. Your presence, she said quietly. It feels steady. Evan rubbed the back of his neck, a little unsure how to respond. Well, I am doing my best. Selah pushed her hand against the cave wall to sit up straighter. Even that small action looked careful, like she was trying to relearn the limits of her strength. My people teach that when the desert takes something from you, it leaves something else behind. A lesson, a truth, a debt. I do not want anything from you, Evan said. You owe me nothing. She tilted her head again, that familiar gesture of curiosity. That is what I do not understand. You help without expecting. It is not complicated, Evan replied. You were sinking. I reached out. Anyone should have done that. But they did not, she whispered. There was no bitterness in her voice, only an acknowledgement of something she had accepted long before he found her. Evan reached for a small container from his pack, opening it to reveal a nutrient gel pack and a pack of water. You need to eat something, he said. It might not be familiar, but it is safe. She accepted it, turning the gel pack in her hands as if studying its texture. Then she tasted it in cautious sips. It is pleasant, she admitted after a moment. Humans make many simple things feel warm. It is just food, Evan said with a small smile. Nothing special. She watched him while she ate, the way her amber eyes reflected the lantern light making it hard to tell where her thoughts were drifting. Evan, she said softly, when you found me, I thought the desert would decide my end. She paused, her voice barely above the hum of the heater. But instead, I found you. He felt that sentence land in the quiet space between them. Not heavy, not dramatic, just true. He shifted so he could look at her more directly. You are safe here, he said. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, we will find a path out together. Selah let out a slow breath, as if releasing something she had held onto for too long. I believe you, she whispered. And for the first time, her voice carried something warmer than relief. It carried trust. The first light of morning seeped into the cave in a soft, muted glow, brushing over the stone and settling gently on Selah's skin. Evan woke before the sun fully crested the ridge, his instincts tuned to the desert's rhythm. The air was cooler now, crisp enough that each breath felt sharp but clean. Selah stirred moments later, blinking as if the light itself was unfamiliar. Her pale hair caught the early gold, giving her an almost weightless look. Did you sleep at all? She asked in a soft whisper. Evan smiled. Enough. The ground here is solid. I checked it twice before resting. She looked toward the entrance, then back at him. You check the world before you trust it. That is wise. Just habit, he replied. The desert changes quickly. I like to know what I am walking into. Selah pushed herself upright with more ease than the night before. Her movements were still careful, but she no longer looked like the sand was holding her under its memory. My strength is returning, she said, almost surprised. Your air, it feels different. Evan adjusted his gear and offered her a steady hand as she stood. The cave helped. And you hydrated well. We should move soon before the heat rises. She took his hand, her fingers cool and light, and let him guide her toward the cave entrance. Outside, the dunes stretched far and silent, their lines sharp under the newborn sun. The shifting sand zone shimmered in the distance like a mirage that did not know it was dangerous. Sayla paused at the threshold, her expression still and thoughtful. When I look at this land, she murmured, it feels both alive and empty. It is both, Evan replied. You learn to listen to it. The wind tells you one thing, the sand another. She turned to him. And what do you tell it? Evan shrugged with a small smile. That I am just passing through. Sayla considered that, then stepped forward, letting the sunlight wash over her. The warmth seemed to settle along her shoulders, softening her posture. She stood for a moment, simply feeling the desert, as if reacquainting herself with the world she almost lost. Evan walked beside her, scanning the ridge line for a safe descent. The nearest research station is about 5 miles from here. He said, if we take the rocky path, we avoid the unstable zones. 5 miles, she repeated thoughtfully. That is manageable. We can go slowly, Evan assured her. No rush. She nodded. Thank you. A quiet moment passed between them, filled only by the faint hiss of the breeze. Then Sayla asked, Evan, when you saved me, did you think I belonged here? In this place? No, he answered honestly. I just thought you should have a chance to choose where you belong. Her head lowered slightly, not in shame, but in understanding, as if the idea itself was something she had never been offered before. She took a slow breath, the kind that settles rather than startles. No one has said that to me, she whispered. Not once. Evan looked at her, noticing how the sunlight touched her amber eyes, making them brighter, clearer. Well, he said gently, there is a first time for everything. Sayla's fingers brushed his sleeve, not seeking support this time, but offering connection. Then let us walk, she said. Together. And as they began their careful descent from the cave, the desert felt less vast, less silent, as though it recognized something new forming in the space between their footsteps. The rocky path sloped gently downward, guiding Evan and Sayla along the ridge as the morning warmed the desert. Every few minutes, Evan checked the scanner for ground stability, and each time he did, Sayla watched him with quiet attention, as if trying to understand the logic behind every move he made. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that stretched across the dunes like dark strokes on a golden canvas. Sayla moved carefully, but no longer appeared fragile. Her balance steadied with each step, though she still placed her hand lightly on the rocks when the ground tilted. Evan kept an easy pace beside her, not pushing, not rushing, simply matching her rhythm. The silence between them felt comfortable, filled with the sound of sand brushing against itself under the wind. After a while, Sayla said, You trust the scanner more than your own eyes. Evan glanced at the device in his hand. The desert can trick your eyes. Heat changes what you think you see. She nodded slowly. In my culture, we are taught that the ground remembers everything, but it does not always reveal the truth. Sometimes it hides it. Evan smiled faintly. Seems the deserts on our worlds have that in common. Sayla looked at him, her expression curious. Do humans hide truth? Sometimes, he admitted. Not always on purpose. And you? She asked. Evan took a breath, thinking. I try not to. But I am not perfect. Sayla kept walking, but her gaze lingered on him a moment longer. Imperfection is not a flaw, she said softly. It is a path. Her words stayed with him as they reached a narrow ledge where the ridge dipped into a small valley of solid stone. The wind was calmer there, quieter, as though the land itself was listening. Evan paused, scanning the area. We can rest for a moment. The next stretch is flat. Sayla sat on a sun-warmed rock, drawing her knees up and letting the heat soak gently into her limbs. Evan sat nearby, setting his pack between them. She watched the dunes in silence, her amber eyes reflecting the shifting lines. Evan, she said after a long moment, may I ask something? Of course. When you found me, what did you think I was? Evan blinked, surprised by the question. I did not think, he said honestly. Not at first. I just saw someone who needed help. Not human, she pressed gently. Not from your world. That did not matter. Evan shook his head. Not to me. Selah looked down at her hands, turning them slowly as if studying the faint movement of light on her skin. On my world, she whispered. People like me. We are taught that other species fear us, or avoid us, or wish for distance. Well, Evan said softly, I guess I did not learn that lesson. Her lips curved, not quite a smile but something close. Your actions make little sense in the stories I was told. Maybe your stories need new endings, he replied. Selah let that idea settle in the warm air. Then she looked up at him, her expression open in a way he had not seen before. You saved me, she said, not because of who I am, but because I was falling. Evan nodded. Anyone deserves a hand when they are sinking. Selah breathed in slowly, the movement calm and steady. Then perhaps what surprises me most, she whispered, is that you stayed. Evan met her eyes, seeing the honesty in her words. I stay, he said, gently, when someone needs someone to stay. She held that sentence for a long, quiet moment. Then she stood, strength returning to her posture. Then let us walk again, she said softly, before the day becomes too hot. And together, they continued across the desert, each step bringing them closer to safety and to a truth neither had expected to find. The heat rose slowly as midday approached, the kind of dry warmth that wrapped itself around every movement. Evan and Selah continued across the flatter stretch of terrain, the rock beneath their feet giving way to firmer sand that did not shift with each step. Still, Evan watched the ground carefully, trusting the scanner but also listening to the subtle language of the desert he had learned over years of fieldwork. Selah walked beside him with a steadiness that had not been present the day before. Her posture was taller, her steps more certain, and the way she breathed felt fuller, as if her body had finally caught up to her will to keep moving. Yet something lingered in her eyes, a quiet thought she carried but had not spoken. After some time, Evan asked, How are you feeling? Selah considered her answer. Stronger, she said. But there is something I have not told you. Evan slowed his pace, giving her room to speak if she chose. She looked out across the dunes, the wind brushing strands of pale hair across her face. When I fell into the shifting sand, I was not simply lost. I was searching. Evan raised an eyebrow. Searching for what? Selah ran her fingers lightly through the warm air, as if tracing something invisible. My people sent me to study the desert here. We believed it held ancient structures beneath the surface. But I misread the movement of the dunes. I stepped where I should not have, and the ground it took me. Evan nodded slowly. Accidents happen. Even experts misjudge terrain. Selah's gaze lowered. But my people do not see it that way. They believe mistakes reveal weakness. They sent me alone to prove myself. Evan felt a quiet shift inside him, something like a tightening of understanding. They expected you to succeed without support. Yes, she whispered. And when the sand pulled me under, I thought, perhaps they were right about me. She paused, her voice barely more than breath. But then, you came. Evan walked a few steps in silence, letting the weight of her words settle. Needing help does not make you weak, he said. It makes you alive. She looked at him with a soft, uncertain expression. Your world thinks differently. Not everyone, Evan replied. But I do. Selah's steps slowed as the wind shifted direction, carrying a faint, distant hum. Evan's scanner flickered, picking up a signal. He checked the display. There is a communications beacon nearby, he said. Probably from the research station. Selah listened to the hum, her amber eyes narrowing slightly. It sounds familiar, she whispered. It might be from my people. Evan met her gaze, searching for any sign of fear. If it is, you will not face them alone. She blinked, surprised by the certainty in his voice. You would stand with me? Even if they question why you were with me. They can question whatever they want, he said. I know why I stayed. Selah stopped walking, turning fully toward him. The sunlight caught her silvery skin, making her look almost like she carried a piece of the morning sky inside her. Evan, she said softly, you do not understand what that means to someone like me. Then explain it, he said gently. She exhaled, steady and slow. In my world, loyalty is expected. But kindness is rare. And choosing to stay beside someone who has nothing to offer you, that is almost unheard of. Evan felt the desert quiet around them, as if even the wind paused to listen. I did not stay because of what you could offer me, he said. I stayed because you mattered. Sayla held his gaze for a long moment, the hum of the beacon drifting softly across the sand. Then whatever waits for us ahead, she whispered. I am not afraid. And together, they followed the faint signal toward whatever the desert would reveal next. The beacon's hum grew clearer as Evan and Sayla approached a rise in the terrain where the dunes met a stretch of ancient stone. The air shimmered slightly, not from heat alone, but from a faint energy field that drifted like a thin veil over the valley ahead. Sayla slowed, her eyes narrowing with recognition. This frequency, she whispered, it belongs to my people. But it is not a distress call. It is a recall signal. Evan adjusted his scanner, watching the readings shift. So they are nearby. Yes, she said softly, though her voice carried something more complicated than simple relief. Evan noticed the way her fingers curled and uncurled at her side, as if she was preparing herself for a moment she had not expected to come so soon. They reached the top of the rise, and the desert opened into a shallow basin. In the center stood a sleek silver structure half buried in sand, triangular in shape with smooth angles that caught the light in long, reflective lines. A soft blue glow pulsed from its surface. Sayla exhaled, her eyes distant. That is a field outpost. It means they came searching, but not for me. Evan glanced at her. Then for what? Sayla hesitated. For the data I was carrying. My mission was not only to study the dunes. It was to retrieve readings from a site beneath them. The structures buried under this desert, they are older than any species we know. Evan nodded slowly, understanding settling in. So they wanted the information, not the person gathering it. Her silence confirmed it. They descended the slope, the sand soft underfoot as the field outpost grew larger. Halfway down, the door of the structure slid open with a faint mechanical sigh. 3 figures stepped out, tall and slender like Sayla, their skin carrying different shades of blue and silver. Their eyes glowed softly in the sunlight. Sayla stopped walking. The wind carried a hush across the dunes, as though everything around them held its breath. Evan stayed beside her, letting her decide how to move forward. One of the alien figures stepped ahead of the others. His eyes swept over Sayla, taking in her condition, her dust-covered clothing, the tired but steady way she stood. His voice was clear, cool, almost clinical. Sayla Varen. You were expected to return 2 cycles ago. Your silence was noted. Sayla's posture tightened. I was caught in the shifting sands. My equipment failed. The figure did not react, neither with concern nor accusation. We require the data unit. Sayla paused, then reached into the small compartment of her belt where a thin metallic disc rested. She held it, but did not immediately extend her hand. The lead figure looked at Evan next, his gaze scanning him with a detached curiosity. This human accompanied you. He saved me, Sayla said, her voice firmer now. Without him, I would not be standing here. The alien's expression did not change. Assistance noted. Evan felt the impersonal tone like a cold breeze, but he said nothing. Sayla stepped forward, placing the data unit into the alien's hand. For a moment, the exchange felt final, almost like the closing of a door. But then Sayla turned back to Evan. Her voice lowered. There is something I must say. Evan met her eyes, steady and calm. I am listening. When I thought the dunes would take me, she whispered, I believed that would be my end. My people would say it was my failure. But you. She paused, searching for words that carried the weight of what she felt. You showed me that life is not measured by perfection. It is measured by moments of choice. The wind lifted her pale hair as she took one small step closer. And you chose to reach for me. Evan felt something shift inside the quiet space between them, a truth settling like warm sand after a long gust of wind. Sayla held his gaze with a warmth that had not been there before. Whatever comes next, she said softly. I wanted you to know that. Her people waited in silence behind her, the desert stretching wide and still, as though it understood the importance of the moment. The desert held its breath as Sayla stood between her people and Evan, the morning sun casting long, quiet shadows across the basin. The air felt still in a way that did not belong to weather alone. It felt like a pause before truth. The lead alien inspected the data unit, then signaled to the others. They began preparing the outpost for departure, their movements precise and detached. None of them seemed to notice the shift happening in the space Sayla and Evan occupied. Sayla stepped closer to him, her voice low enough that only he could hear. When they take me back, she whispered, they will expect me to resume my position. They will assume nothing has changed. Evan nodded once. But something did. She drew in a soft breath. Yes, you taught me something I did not know I was missing. He did not reply immediately. He just let her speak, the same way he had listened to the winds and the ground and the quiet truths hidden beneath them. On my world, Selah continued, we are told that value comes from purpose, from usefulness, from success. She looked down at her hands, the ones he had pulled from the sand. But you helped me when I had nothing to offer. And you stayed when I asked for nothing in return. Evan gently shifted his stance, letting her see the sincerity in his eyes. You did not need to offer anything, he said. You just needed someone to show up. The wind moved across the basin, soft enough to barely lift the sand, but it carried her response in a voice steady with understanding. And you did. One of her people called her name, their tone neutral but expectant. Selah looked back at them, then returned her gaze to Evan. For a moment, something like conflict flickered across her features, but it softened as she took a single, deliberate step closer. Evan, she said gently, there is one more truth you deserve to know. He waited, quiet, patient. I am not simply a researcher, she said. I am the daughter of the Varen High Scholar. My presence here is part of a lineage duty. My mistakes reflect not only on me, but on him. That is why they sent me alone. Evan felt the pieces shift into place. So all of this, it was a test you were never supposed to fail. Yes, she whispered. But I did. She paused, then added, and yet when I failed, you were the one who found me. Evan exhaled, not in surprise, but in the quiet way someone accepts a truth that already made sense long before it was spoken. Then I am glad I was there. Selah looked at him for a long, unbroken moment. Her amber eyes reflected the pale sky, the soft glow of the outpost lights, and something else, something human in its warmth. If I had sunk beneath the dunes, she said, I would have carried only fear. But now I leave with something else. She reached up, lightly touching his hand, the gesture simple but full of meaning. I leave with the memory of someone who chose compassion over distance. Evan did not speak. He did not need to. The silence between them was enough. Her people signaled again, urging her toward the outpost. Selah gave one final look at the desert, the shifting sands, the stone ridge, the cave they had shared, and then at the human who had changed the way the world felt beneath her feet. Goodbye, Evan, she whispered. May your steps always find solid ground. And as she walked toward the waiting craft, the desert wind rose gently, swirling around her like an unseen echo. Evan watched her go, the morning light catching her silvery form until she became a distant shape against the horizon. In the quiet that followed, the dunes shimmered softly, as if acknowledging what had passed between them. The air felt different now, not empty, not lonely, just full of a silence that carried meaning, one that settled deep, like something the desert itself chose to remember.